European Commissioner for Budget, Anti-Fraud and Public Administration, Piotr Serafin.
Dear President of the Integrity Authority, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, a few days ago, some of you may have received a message through the Hungarian government's messaging system regarding a corruption case in Ukraine. By now, you all know that the high-level politicians and business people were allegedly siphoning money from energy contracts. But if you follow the independent media, you also know that this reported scandal was exposed by NABU, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, whose creation was supported by the civil society in 2040, during the days of the Dignity Revolution, and was considered by the European Commission as a condition for strengthening the relationship between Ukraine and the European Union. Because if you ask for visa-free travel, if you want special agreements, and ultimately you want to join the European Union, you must demonstrate that you fight corruption and that you do it effectively. That is why, whenever in doubt, whenever the existing institutional framework proves insufficient, we ask for a separate, independent authority with strong powers. The fight against corruption does not end with the accession to the EU. In fact, it never ends. We must remain vigilant at all times. In the EU, we have a strong and comprehensive anti-fraud system with OLAF, present here today, and lately the European Public Prosecutor's Office, playing the most prominent role. And if we have doubts about the functioning of a national anti-fraud system, we intervene. For example, Bulgaria and Romania were under the cooperation and verification mechanism for 16 years after they joined the European Union. And we asked Hungary to establish the Integrity Authority, where I now have a pleasure to speak. Why do we do this? Not to punish anyone. We do it because we care. As Joe Biden once said, corruption is a cancer that eats away a citizen's faith in democracy. Corruption is just another form of tyranny. It is not only about common values and democracy. It is also about prosperity and economic progress. And this is about social justice. Because every euro, every forint, every Polish zloty taken by corrupt individuals in their private pockets is a euro or forint or Polish zloty taken from someone else. From a teacher on a state salary, from a student at university, from a patient in a hospital, from a passenger in a train. Stolen public money that could and should have been used to improve public services and modernize infrastructure. Fighting corruption in the EU is also about preserving mutual trust. We ask the governments of 27 member states to contribute part of their national budgets to a common European pot. In reality, we ask millions of Europeans to contribute part of their income to finance our common priorities. We do this because we believe that every euro spent in one member state brings benefits to all. especially through the spillover effects of the single markets. But if our citizens see that their money is being stolen, they will lose trust in the EU, and the damage will be irreparable. That is why we must be strict and vigilant with EU funds. Every euro of public money must be accounted for carefully, transparently, and with zero tolerance for abuse. And that is why anti-corruption bodies like yours, Mr. President, play such a crucial role. As I said, the fight against corruption never ends. It is a lifelong effort, and no one can undertake it alone. Even the best anti-corruption authority cannot achieve this goal by itself. We need a full system of checks and balances. We need an independent judicial system capable of bringing corrupt individuals to justice. We need a vibrant civil society that puts pressure on governments whenever the fight against corruption weakens, as we saw in Ukraine, where civil society stood up to protect NABU when it mattered most. And we need education to create the right mindset so people understand that they do not have to pay for healthcare, for proper education for their children, or simply to have administrative matters handled fairly. When I was brought up in communist Poland, bribery was part of everyday life. Today, it is rightly recognized as a crime. And finally, we need free media and we need to protect whistleblowers. Time and again, it has been proven that without independent investigative journalists and without adequate protection for whistleblowers, many corruption cases would never have come to light. Some journalists have paid the highest price for this, even in democracies in the European Union. Think of Jan Kuciak, who was investigating high-level tax fraud in Slovakia and was shot dead together with his fiancée, Martina Kushnirova, on the night of 21st February 2018. Think of Daphne Caruana Galizia, the Maltese journalist and anti-corruption activist killed by a car bomb in broad daylight on 16th October 2017. We honor their memory, but we must also ensure that such tragedies are never repeated. Journalists must be able to do their work in safety. Ladies and gentlemen, I am the Budget Commissioner, but I am also responsible for anti-fraud action, because we cannot ask taxpayers for money and we cannot spend it fairly without a strong anti-fraud system. We have such a system in place, but we must constantly improve it, especially now as we propose an ambitious EU budget of 2 trillion euros for the next financial period. If the funds we request are at a record high, then it is one more reason to ensure that our anti-fraud system is as robust as ever. As you know, we now have the budget conditionality mechanism, which allows Council at the request of the Commission to suspend EU funds if the principle of rule of law is not guaranteed. We introduced this mechanism to protect the financial interests of the Union, which are ultimately the interests of millions of EU taxpayers, not as a sanctioning mechanism. If there is no system of checks and balances, if the justice system is not independent, we cannot be sure that fraud will be properly investigated and prosecuted. In the next multi-annual financial framework, respect for the rule of law and fundamental rights will remain key. The conditionality regulation will continue to apply to all EU funds. We have proposed harmonized conditionality rules for all shared management funds, creating a more consistent framework for ensuring that respect for the rule of law and the Charter are upheld. In the new budget, a significant share of funding, in particular cohesion and agricultural funds, will be channeled through the national and regional partnership plans. The NRPP, as we call them, the NRPP regulation will propose financial support for reforms, so incentives related to the rule of law, but also safeguards and conditionalities to ensure that the EU budget is protected. To have their plans approved by the Commission, Member States will need to demonstrate that they have adequate mechanisms in place to guarantee compliance at all times. Payments may be partially or fully suspended at any point during implementation, following the principle of proportionality and taking into account the nature, duration, gravity and scope of any breach and its impact on the budget. Member States will have 1 year to address the breach, failing which EU support will be reduced. Our proposal also requires Member States to adopt national anti-fraud strategies as a key part of their management, control and audit system. That would be a prerequisite to access to funds. Member States will also be obliged to report all cases of suspected fraud, corruption and irregularities, including conflict of interests and double funding. They would need to do it in the Commission's irregularity management system. Information on beneficiaries, final recipients, contractors and subcontractors, as well as on operations, will be published both nationally and at the EU level through a single gateway. For transparency is a key factor in protecting the Union budget. Transparency is the most powerful factor to protect the EU budget. We are also strengthening the anti-fraud architecture. It has evolved over time, but today's environment is more complex than ever. Transnational fraud, including large-scale VAT fraud, has increased. Organized crime deliberately targets EU funds, and fraudsters now exploit new technologies, artificial intelligence, encrypted communication, cryptocurrencies. They do it to commit and conceal their crimes. These realities require us to strengthen our anti-fraud architecture. The review of the current system allows us to identify and close existing gaps and to ensure that Europe's defences are fit for the future. In this context, independent bodies like the Hungarian Integrity Authority will continue to play a crucial role. To protect European taxpayers, such institutions must be strengthened across the Union, and they will be essential to ensuring proper implementation of the next long-term budget. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, your work protects something essential: trust. Trust in institutions, trust in democracy, and in how we use taxpayers' money. Corruption is never defeated, once and for all. It requires constant vigilance and integrity. The Commission stands with you, as we stand with all the institutions and citizens who care about transparency in public life. Together, we can ensure that EU funds are used fairly, transparently, and for the benefit of all our citizens. Thank you.
So the new funds are record high. Anti-corruption mechanisms need to be robust.